The village of Eld Hollow sat quiet between the folds of green hills and whispering pines, where morning mists clung like old secrets. Life there moved with the steady rhythm of tradition, of harvests and hearthfires, of names passed from fathers to sons. It was a place where everyone knew everyone, and remembered everything. Among the crooked lanes and ivy-clad cottages lived a girl named Lyra. She was quiet, like the wind in the treetops, and kind in the way most people overlooked, offering water to passing travelers, patching up the torn sleeves of children's shirts, singing lullabies to animals who had no one else. She had the kind of beauty that was only noticed when she was gone. Soft eyes like river stone, hair like autumn wheat, and a silence that drew people in and then made them uncomfortable. She lived under the roof of her late mother's second husband, a stonemason named Cale, and his son Merrick, her stepbrother in blood but not in spirit. Where Lyra was soft, Merrick was sharp. He stood tall and proud, with broad shoulders earned by labor and a voice that was always just a little too loud. He was handsome, admired, and knew it. Where Lyra gathered kindness like firewood, Merrick collected pride and stored it like coin. Their relationship was a fragile, silent war. Jealousy hung like smoke between them. Merrick, forever aware of how villagers softened in Lyra's presence, and Lyra, too often reminded that no matter how long she lived in Eld Hollow, she was always the daughter of the outsider woman. Whispers followed her, faint and constant. She doesn't belong. She's not one of us. She's strange, that girl. Not right. Still she endured. Her heart bruised but unbroken, she served the village quietly, and for years the peace, such as it was, held. Until the day it didn't. It was the festival of the third moon, the time of year when the villagers strung ribbons between the homes, when songs floated on the wind and the air smelled of roasted nuts and mead. Lyra, as always, helped prepare the herbs for the blessing, her fingers stained with mint and chamomile. Merrick, drunk on cider and surrounded by friends, stumbled past her. "You've got the hands of a servant," he said loudly, sneering. Lyra looked up, confused. "I'm helping, same as everyone." Merrick laughed, but there was an edge to it. "You're not everyone. You're just the charity we never asked for. My father took you in out of pity." A few villagers paused, uneasy. Lyra rose slowly. "Your father loved my mother." Merrick's face turned red and his fists clenched. "Don't speak like your family." A hush fell. The kind that comes just before the storm. Then, with a suddenness that stunned the crowd, Merrick lunged. He grabbed a fistful of Lyra's hair, long, golden, and braided with care, and dragged her toward the village gate. "Merrick," someone gasped. "What are you?" But no one moved. The gate stood at the heart of the village, old as memory and carved with the symbols of their ancestors. It was the passage between their world and the woods, between safety and the unknown. He pulled the braid through the iron hinge and tied it there with brutal efficiency. Lyra cried out as strands tore, her hands clawing at the knot. "Stay there, outsider," Merrick spat. "Let the wind speak to you since you love silence so much." Then he stepped back, breathing hard, cheeks flushed. Lyra knelt, her hair bound tightly, her face turned away from the villagers, the same villagers who stared but did not move. She looked for sympathy and found none. Eyes turned away. Some with shame, others with cowardice. No one helped. Tears tracked down her cheeks, but she made no sound. Her pride was quiet, but it lived. The wind picked up. The gate creaked. A deep, drawn-out groan echoed through the square as the old wood shifted, as if straining to close. But it didn't. It stopped just shy of the latch and hung there. The air grew still. Unnaturally so. Lyra, still bound, froze. One of the elders, old Tamlin, whose memory stretched back before most were born, approached slowly, staff tapping against the cobblestones. He stared at the gate. Then at Lyra. "She's not moved," he said quietly. "But the gate, it won't close." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "Perhaps the hinge is rusted," someone offered. Tamlin shook his head. "That hinge has held 3 generations. It knows its purpose." More villagers gathered now, drawn by the strangeness of it. The air felt charged, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. Even Merrick looked uncertain. Another elder stepped forward, Anwen, keeper of the stories. "In the old tales," she said, voice low, "when the gate fails to close, it is a sign. A warning." "A bad omen," Tamlin added. A child began to cry, and her mother hushed her quickly. Still tied, Lyra looked up. "It's only a broken hinge," she whispered, her voice raw. But no one listened. Because in Eld Hollow, symbols mattered more than sense. And this was no small thing. The villagers began to argue. Some demanded Merrick untie her. Others warned it was too late. The omen had been made. The gate had chosen its protest. But it was Anwen who silenced them all. This was done in humiliation, she said, voice trembling with ancient authority. In full view. Without provocation. And not one of us intervened. The gate saw. Merrick tried to scoff. It's just a gate. Anwen turned to him, eyes sharp. Then go untie her. He hesitated. Go on, she said. Merrick stepped forward, his bravado crumbling, and reached for the knot. But as he touched the hinge, the gate creaked again, louder this time, and the air dropped 10 degrees. He yanked his hand back. Lyra stared at him, not pleading, just watching. Something old and quiet moved in her eyes. For the first time Merrick looked away. Eventually, it was Tamlin who approached, who knelt and untied the braid with trembling fingers, whispering something only the wind could hear. Lyra stood, her hair torn, her head high. The gate did not move. The villagers waited. But nothing happened. And that silence, that awful heavy silence, lingered long after the crowd dispersed. In the days that followed, strange things stirred in Eld Hollow. The well ran dry though it had never before. Milk soured before sunrise. Children woke screaming from dreams of gates that led to nowhere. No one blamed Lyra out loud. But they began to leave her gifts, flowers, dried fruits, carved tokens, left outside her door in the dead of night. Apologies wrapped in silence. She never acknowledged them. Merrick, once the village's golden son, found himself alone more often. His friends stopped calling. His father said nothing, but the house grew colder. One morning Merrick left with a pack and did not return. The gate was repaired, oiled and blessed. But it still hesitated before closing. Lyra remained. She kept to her quiet ways, tending the sick, singing to birds. And the village watched her differently now, not with suspicion but with reverence. Fearful, yes, but respectful. Because the gate remembered. And so did she. Eld Hollow was a village built on rules, spoken and unspoken, carved into wood and woven into lullabies. Rules of seed and soil, of wind and weather, of what one must never do and who one must never cross. But after the gate refused to close, something shifted. The rules bent. Broke. Or perhaps they were never rules at all, just beliefs held tightly enough to feel like truth. The gate still stood. Tall. Silent. Open. Blacksmiths had hammered it. Carpenters measured the joints. The elders blessed it with ash and rosemary and words so old even they didn't know what they meant anymore. Still, the gate remained ajar, as though some invisible force leaned against it from the other side. It creaked in the wind, a sound too close to a sob. At first they told themselves it was a quirk, a bit of bad luck. But luck does not explain the foxes that trotted through in broad daylight, unafraid. Or the rabbits that multiplied in numbers not seen in decades, chewing through the gardens like harvest had come early. Then the deer came. But these did not stop at the fields. They walked the village paths, left prints in the earth beside cottages. One stared in through a widow's kitchen while she stirred soup. Another was found curled in the chapel, breathing slow and steady, as though it had always belonged there. Some villagers found it enchanting. Others did not. Especially when the crops began to blacken near the threshold of the gate. It started with the herbs closest to the path. Mint leaves wilted overnight, rosemary grew brittle and gray. Then the wheat stalks, tall and golden only a week before, turned sour at the tips and collapsed into dust. The soil there turned strange, not dry, not wet, but heavy as if it held something buried. People began to mutter. It's the shame, old Tamlin said one night by the hearth. The gate remembers the cruelty. It's her sorrow, a midwife whispered. She left it behind and now it soaks the wood. She cursed it, said another. Whether she meant to or not. Fear blooms fastest where truth is uncertain. And Lyra, the girl with the golden braid and the silence of winter snow, became the center of it all. She withdrew in the days after the gate, as though her heart had folded in on itself. Where once she had tended children and coaxed bees from windowsills, now she stayed indoors, the cottage shuttered tight. Those brave enough to knock heard movement inside, but the door never opened. She did not come to the well. She did not attend the autumn rites. Her world had narrowed to 4 wooden walls and whatever she saw in her dreams. And oh, the dreams! They came with the first frost, sharp and sudden, on a night when the sky split open with stars and silence. She woke gasping, hair plastered to her neck, heart drumming like a warning bell. She remembered little, only a gate but not the one in Eld Hollow. This one was older, made of bone and vine, creaking with voices instead of wood. Beyond it lay a forest she didn't know, where the trees leaned in and whispered in a language she almost understood. She dreamed again the next night. And the next. The dreams grew stranger, A door opening in the sky, footsteps in her room that left no prints, voices calling her by a name she didn't recognize but which made her weep when she heard it. Her sleep became a battlefield. She woke exhausted, speaking fragments of riddles she couldn't remember upon sunrise. And always the gate. Open. Waiting. Once, in a dream, she stood before it and saw herself on the other side, older, perhaps, or simply different. That version of her did not cry. Did not flinch. She held something glowing in her hand and whispered, "You are not broken. You are becoming." Lyra woke screaming. The village, meanwhile, frayed like a rope pulled too taut. Children were born silent or too loud. Dogs barked at shadows only they could see. Rain fell when the sky was clear, and sometimes laughter was heard in the woods when no one was there. Farms that once yielded abundance gave bitter squash and bitterer apples. Milk curdled in the pail. Birds began flying in odd spirals overhead, forming symbols no one could understand but everyone feared. Merrick's name was barely spoken now. He had vanished after the incident and no one admitted missing him. Some said he'd gone mad with guilt. Others said the forest had taken him. A few, in hushed tones, wondered if the gate itself had marked him, if it had opened not for Lyra but for him. Still, the people did not speak to her. Even as fear crept under their beds and into their prayers, they kept their distance. Until the day a child went missing. Little Ray, barely 6, disappeared while playing near the edge of the woods. Her shoes were found near the gate, not outside it but within, just beyond the threshold. The entire village searched, torches and calls echoing into the dusk. But the woods gave no answer. That night, a delegation of elders stood before Lyra's door. She opened it at last. Her face was pale, drawn, hair loose and dull. But her eyes were different now. Deeper. As if she had been speaking with something far older than any of them. Tamlin stepped forward. "The gate won't close." She said nothing. "Crops are dying." Still silence. "A child is gone." Lyra leaned against the doorframe, tired beyond her years. "I didn't take her." "We know," Anwen said softly. "But the gate listens to you. We think it hears you, or speaks through you." "I didn't ask for this," Lyra whispered. "I didn't choose the sorrow." "No," Anwen agreed. "But it chose you." There was silence. Then Tamlin cleared his throat. "You've dreamed, haven't you?" Lyra nodded. "Do you know what the gate wants?" At night, Eld Hollow fell into a silence that was no longer peaceful. It was a taut, listening silence, as though the village itself had grown ears, straining to hear what might be creeping through the still open gate. And there were whispers. Not wind. Not owl song. Not imagination. They started faint, like breath drawn through reeds, but grew clearer as the weeks passed. The villagers huddled in their beds, clutching charms and muttering prayers. Some stuffed herbs into their ears. Others left for neighboring towns, vowing not to return until the gate was dealt with. But one girl did not hide. Lyra heard them. They called to her. The first time the gate spoke, she was sitting beneath it, watching the frost melt off its iron hinges beneath the morning sun. The wood was old, cracked in places. Her braid, or what remained of it, still clung to the hinge where Merrick had bound it. The strands had turned the color of pale straw, but they had not fallen away. Worse, they had begun to grow. Vines of hair threaded down into the gate's grain like roots seeking water. No matter how many times she trimmed it, it always returned, quietly, insistently, as if the gate had accepted the offering and made it part of itself. That morning she laid her fingers against the frame. And the gate breathed. It was not air that moved but memory. The world blinked. A field of summer. Her mother's voice, singing a lullaby in a language no one used anymore. A pair of hands braiding her hair with rosemary. A boy, Merrick, younger, weeping behind the barn after his mother died. Another memory, not hers, of a midwife losing a child in the snow, her sobs buried under ice. A man building the gate, weeping as he carved the names of the village's first dead into the wood. More and more, griefs and joys, secrets and truths, tangled like threads spun into the gate's very frame. The closer she leaned, the more they unraveled. When she pulled away, hours had passed. That night, Lyra returned, lantern in hand. She stood alone beneath the half-moon, facing the gate like one might face a confessional. The village watched from darkened windows, their fear a pulsing thing behind glass. They had begun to call her the Witch of the Gate. Some whispered it with awe. Others with dread. She placed her palm to the grain. The whispering began again, clearer now. Not just memory but voice. "You left part of yourself here. The sorrow rooted deep. Your pain made a doorway. "We are listening." Lyra knelt. "Who are you?" "We are what has been silenced. We are truths buried under shame. We are those the village forgot. And we are you." Over the next nights, the whispers grew more coherent, like threads weaving into cloth. Lyra learned to listen, to surrender to the visions when they came. She stopped fearing the cold fingers brushing her cheeks, the ghost-laden dreams, the way her shadow seemed to split in two under moonlight. She began to understand. The gate had not simply broken. It had awakened. Because something had been done that could not be undone, an act of public cruelty and the silence of many. The gate, ancient and sacred, had become a vessel for that wound. And her hair, torn, humiliated, left behind, had made it personal. The gate had no voice until Lyra's grief gave it one. Now it remembered everything. And it would not forget. The villagers avoided her now entirely. Some threw salt where she walked. A few left gifts still, bundles of dried herbs, carvings of doves, dolls with her likeness. Apologies in their own way. But no one spoke to her. Even Anwen, once brave enough to stand at her door, now offered only glances from afar. Lyra didn't blame them. Not really. They were afraid, not of her perhaps, but of what she had become. Or what the gate was making her into. Sometimes Lyra wasn't sure herself. One night the whispers changed. They turned inward. The gate showed her memories she'd buried deep, things she had not dared recall. Merrick dragging her through the crowd, laughter like knives. The silence of the villagers, the downturned eyes, the stillness. Her mother's death, not the soft passing she had been told, but fever and abandonment, left in the edge room of the house when Cale feared it might spread. And one memory stranger still, a vision of herself as a child, standing at the gate in winter, hand outstretched to something invisible. Snow swirling. A voice not her own, whispering, "One day you'll open what we could not." She woke in tears, heart pounding, hair tangled with pine needles though she hadn't left the house. The gate was no longer only a memory keeper. It had become a teacher. By the next full moon she stopped sleeping altogether. She kept vigil by the gate, listening, learning. It taught her how to read sorrow in the wind, how to trace the path of buried truths. It showed her the sins of the village not written in their songs, the exile of the midwife who loved a woman, the forest boy who was never found, the children who were sent away and never spoken of again. Every one of them had left sorrow behind. The gate had gathered it, layered it, preserved it, and now, through Lyra, it had found voice. One evening, as Lyra rested her head against the gate, the whisper became a name. Her mother's. Followed by. She came through once. She tried to close the way. But the village would not let her. Lyra's breath caught. She was one of you? She was the first of you. She gave her life to hold the wound shut. But the shame was greater than the love. It opened again when you were broken. The realization struck like lightning. Her mother had known. Had been the gate's keeper once. Had carried the same dreams, the same weight. Had tried to bear the sorrow of others, and had died because no one else would. Lyra wept, forehead pressed to the wood. You can finish what she began. You can open it fully. And let it speak. Or you can close it, and bury it all again. She whispered back, what would that cost me? Everything you are. Or everything you were. She left the gate for the first time in days and returned to her cottage. She stood before her mirror and looked at the girl staring back. No, she said. But I think it's waiting for something. Waiting for what? I don't know. Anwen's voice was almost kind. Then maybe it's time to find out. That night, Lyra stood before the gate once more. The village stayed back, torches flickering as she approached alone. Her feet crunched frost into the earth. The gate loomed, still ajar, moaning quietly in the breeze. She placed a hand on it. Cold. Unyielding. And yet, familiar. She closed her eyes. The wind shifted. The village held its breath. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then Lyra opened her mouth and sang. A single note, low and strange, not a tune she knew, but one that lived inside her bones. A note that belonged to stone and seed, to sorrow and sky. The gate creaked louder. Some said they saw shapes in the mist that night, tall and thin with eyes like lanterns. Others claimed the wind whispered names no one had spoken in generations. The gate did not close. But it moved. Just a little. And that, for the villagers, was enough to believe something had changed. Back in her cottage, Lyra slept. And this time the dream did not come like a storm. It came like an invitation. She walked through the forest of her visions, where leaves shimmered like mirrors and the ground hummed beneath her steps. She passed the gate of bone and vine, which bowed slightly as she approached. And on the other side stood the girl from before, older, stronger, eyes full of thunder. "You are ready now," she said. "For what?" "To remember. And to choose." Lyra hesitated. "Am I cursed?" The older self smiled. "No. You are a key. That is why the gate chose you." "To what?" "Not all gates are meant to keep things out. Some are meant to let things in." Lyra looked back, through the dream, through the veil, and saw Eldhollow behind her, so small and afraid. Then forward into the unknown. And she stepped through. The braid was gone now. What hair she had left grew strangely, streaked with silver and black, curling into vine-like coils near her temples. Her eyes were sharper, pupils a little too wide in the dark. Her skin glowed faintly under moonlight, as though something beneath had woken. She no longer looked like someone who could live in Eldhollow. And she no longer cared. At dawn she returned to the gate. The village gathered silently, drawn not by invitation but instinct. They watched as Lyra climbed onto the gate itself, barefoot and calm, hair billowing like smoke. She turned to face them, not with anger but with clarity. "I know what the gate is now," she said. No one interrupted. "It remembers everything you've hidden. Everything we've lost. The grief you buried, the people you cast out. It holds the weight of your silence." She placed her palm against the wood. "The only way forward is through." And then she pushed. The gate groaned, creaked, and slowly opened. Not wider. Not physically. But deeply. A wind swept through, warm, wild, filled with voices. Some screamed. Some wept. Some laughed. Memories spilled into the village like a flood. People saw their own pasts, their ancestors, their shame, their truths. And Lyra stood in the center of it all, not gatekeeper, not witch, not victim. But conduit. The girl who had been humiliated had become something more. It was just before the first snow when Lyra left Eldhollow for the first time in years. She followed an overgrown path through the woods, a road once used by traders and travelers, now nearly forgotten. The gate had whispered a name to her, Mother Etta, a keeper of shrines, a weaver of old truths, one who remembered what the village had chosen to forget. Lyra walked for 2 days, sleeping beneath trees that seemed to know her, feeding on roots and berries the forest offered without hesitation. She was not afraid. The wild had changed since the gate opened. It no longer felt like something separate, but like an extension of the same deep memory she now carried. She arrived at the shrine just as dusk dyed the sky the color of bruised fruit. It was not a grand place, just a stone cottage overgrown with ivy and ringed with wind chimes and bones. Smoke curled from the chimney. The air smelled of lavender and burnt honey. Lyra hesitated at the threshold. "I know your step," came a voice from within. "Come in, child of sorrow." Mother Etta was older than the hills, or so people said. Her skin was etched with time, her hair white as bone, coiled in thick braids that hung to her waist. She walked with a carved staff and eyes that held the weight of 100 winters. "You've come about the gate," she said without preamble. Lyra nodded. Etta poured tea without asking. "Then Saturday, it's awake then?" "It's been speaking," Lyra replied. "Remembering. It always remembers. That is its purpose." "But, what is it truly?" Etta was quiet a long time, sipping her tea. "Then, before Eldhollow was built, before there were even roads here, there was a tree. It stood alone at the forest's edge. They called it Varnal, the grieving tree." "Why?" "Because it wept," Etta said simply. "Its bark was streaked as if with tears, and when the wind blew, its leaves sang songs of mourning. The old folk said it had roots in both worlds, this one and the one beneath." Lyra felt a chill. "And the gate was made from it?" "After the girl died," Etta said softly. "Yes." Lyra leaned in. "What girl?" "She had no name they recorded," the old woman replied. "Just the girl at the edge. She was found hanging from the tree one spring morning, young, barefoot, marked with the signs of violence. The village was still small then, just a cluster of homes. No one claimed her. No one confessed. So they buried her near the tree, swore an oath of silence and tried to forget." Lyra felt her breath tighten. But the tree didn't forget. No. The Varnal mourned. It shed leaves for 7 years straight. Crops failed. Animals turned vicious. People began seeing her, the girl, standing beneath the branches at dusk or whispering at their windows. "What happened?" "They cut the tree down," Etta said, eyes dark. "Tried to destroy the sorrow. But wood like that doesn't die easy. It keeps what it was given." "And they made the gate from it?" Lyra said, voice hollow. Etta nodded. "The elders shaped the planks from the fallen trunk and placed them at the village boundary, To mark a threshold, they said. To protect the village from outside evils. But the evil wasn't from outside, Lyra whispered. It was within. As it always is. The room grew quiet, fire popping softly in the hearth. Lyra sipped her tea. The gate doesn't punish, she said slowly. It remembers. And it shows what people want buried. Yes. It holds grief like a bowl holds water, patiently until it overflows. Lyra looked down at her hands. My pain, it's in the wood now. My braid is still there. I think it rooted something. You offered sorrow, Edda said gently. The gate made it part of its truth. You're not the first. There were others? There's always been a girl, Edda said. In every generation. One who listens. One who sees. Some are driven mad. Some disappear. You stayed. Lyra felt something shift inside her. Not pride, but recognition. A quiet knowing. I saw her, she murmured. The girl who died. I think her spirit's still near. She lingers, Edda said. Not out of vengeance. But because no one ever told her story. Lyra swallowed. Then I will. That night, Lyra slept by the fire, her dreams thick with ash and memory. She saw the girl, brown hair tangled, dress torn, eyes wide with betrayal. She heard her cry out once, not in fear but in disbelief, as hands shoved and struck and bound. She felt the rope, the branch, the silence that followed. And then, the tree weeping silently above her grave. Lyra woke with tears on her cheeks. I will remember you, she whispered to the dark. I will tell them. She returned to Eldhollow at dawn, cloak dusted with frost, heart heavy with purpose. The villagers gathered as she approached, some wary, some curious. None dared speak. She stood at the gate, which groaned softly in welcome. She touched the wood, now dark with weather, but pulsing faintly beneath her fingers, like something alive. I know her story now, she said aloud. The girl at the edge. She died here. Not by accident. Not by fate. But because people chose silence over justice. The air turned colder. She was the first. But not the last. Eyes lowered. Faces paled. This gate was made from her tree, Lyra continued. A tree that remembered. A gate that still does. The wind rose. But it does not curse. It protects. Not with swords or stone, but with truth. And it protects only those who respect what it holds. She turned to face the village. You want it closed? Then you must open yourselves first. Speak what's been buried. Remember those you've tried to forget. Make room for sorrow, not just celebration. No one moved. Then a voice, tremulous, old, rose from the crowd. I knew her name, said a woman near the back. She was called Rilla. She worked in my mother's kitchen. She laughed like bells. Another voice, my grandfather said she was with child. That's why he stopped, eyes wet. A third, she was my blood. My great-aunt. We were told she ran away. Lyra nodded, tears running freely. Then let us remember her truthfully. She knelt and began to carve the girl's name into the gate. Rilla. She carved it deep until the wood shuddered and sighed. And then, impossibly, gently, the gate began to close. No wind moved it. No hand touched it. It shifted as though satisfied. As though it had been waiting not for strength but for honesty. It did not shut fully. A sliver of light remained. But for the first time in months it moved. The village did not transform overnight. But they began to speak. Not all and not easily. But slowly, offerings appeared at the base of the gate. Carved names, bits of lace, letters no one would read aloud. A small shrine bloomed there, not grand but real. Made of memory and mourning. Children asked questions. Elders told stories. Lyra sat by the gate most days listening. Not just to the whispers of the wood. But to the people. And for the first time they listened back. The first sign came quietly. Lyra woke one morning to find her hair had changed again. The dark strands had faded near the tips, replaced by a soft, metallic silver that shimmered in the morning light. It wasn't gray, not aged, not dull, but something alive like moonlight woven into thread. She reached to touch it, half afraid it would vanish. It did not. When she stepped outside, the gate creaked softly as if greeting her. And at its base, wild violets had sprung up overnight, blooming in defiance of the coming frost. The blessings were small at first. A wounded sparrow fluttered from the woods one afternoon, its wing dragging. Lyra scooped it up and placed it near the gate. She whispered nothing, just a breath of sorrow, a prayer with no words, and left it there. By morning the bird was gone. Not dead. Flown. In its place, a feather of silvery blue, left at the gate's hinge like a gift. Then came the ivy, slow-growing then sudden. It twisted along the gateposts, curling like fingers, flowering even as snow dusted its leaves. The earth near the threshold, once barren, turned rich. Mushrooms ringed the base. Herbs began sprouting without seed, yarrow, thyme, feverfew. Lyra knew these were not miracles. They were responses. The gate had become something more than a conduit for sorrow. It was becoming a partner. She began to experiment. Each day she left something new pressed into the wood, sprigs of lavender for peace, honey for sweetness, a ribbon from her childhood dress. Each time the gate answered, not always in ways she expected. One morning she tied a note to the wood, "What do you need from me?" By dusk it was gone. In its place, the bark had split slightly, revealing a seam of reddish grain that pulsed faintly in the fading light. She pressed her hand there, and the gate warmed. Others noticed. Not many dared speak openly, but word traveled, carried in whispers, passed like secrets. One by one they began to come. Always at night. They left offerings, letters folded in half a dozen times, cloth dolls wrapped in string, hair combs, buttons, the edge of a child's blanket. Some left nothing but stood for a long while in silence. A few returned the next morning to find flowers grown in the shape of old names. Once, a girl who had not spoken in weeks knelt at the gate and wept. The next day she laughed, not wildly but freely, like something had been loosened inside her. Lyra did not ask what the gate gave them. She only watched. And tended. She hung herbs from the posts like garlands. She swept the path. She whispered good morning, good night. Her hair grew longer, streaked now with silver and pale gold, soft as moss. Her skin changed too, not in color but in stillness. Animals no longer startled when she approached. Children stopped crying in her arms. One evening she found a man waiting at the gate, hunched, hooded, hands trembling. She knew him. Merrick. He had grown gaunt. The pride once stamped into his posture had withered. His eyes were ringed with shame, deeper than any apology. He did not speak, just fell to his knees. He started but the word broke. Lyra stepped closer. He bowed his head. I came to give it back. He held out a small satchel. Inside, neatly wrapped in silk, was the lock of hair he'd once cut from her. Preserved. Hidden. She took it gently. Tied it back to the gate herself. The wood sighed. Merrick wept. Not loud. Not for forgiveness. Just the release of someone finally letting go. That night, the gate shimmered faintly under the moonlight. Lyra sat beneath it, hair splayed across the ground like roots. The wind curled around her like a shawl. You are no longer only sorrow. The voice came from the wood, clear and low. You are memory and seed. You are wound and you are balm. Lyra closed her eyes. And the people have begun to remember. In the weeks that followed, more villagers visited her openly. Anwen came first, shy but steady, carrying a basket of dried apples. Then the old woman who had first named Rilla, bringing a weathered journal filled with stories half erased. Then the boy who once threw stones at her gate now brought candles. They did not always speak. Often they just sat. Lyra listened. Sometimes she shared herbs. Other times stories. But she always listened. One day a child asked, "Does the gate love us?" Lyra smiled. It remembers. That's its love. The child blinked. Then what's your job? Lyra paused, then answered softly. To help you remember too. Still, not everyone trusted. Some avoided the path. A few murmured warnings about witchcraft, about things unnatural. But the village was changing, slowly, unevenly, like spring under snow. And Lyra knew now that change did not mean ease. It meant growth. And sometimes pain. Late one night she sat alone by the gate. Snow fell in soft spirals. The gate creaked. Do you wish to leave? It asked. Lyra touched the bark. I don't know. There is a world beyond. A wound wider than this village. Others who forget. She breathed in the cold. And would I still hear you? You are part of us now. Wherever you go we go. But you must choose. She looked beyond the gate. The forest path shimmered under snow. A road both familiar and new. Behind her, a village learning how to speak again. Ahead, a world of silent stories waiting to be heard. She did not move. Not yet. But she understood now. The gate was not just a border. It was a beginning. And so was she. For a long time Merrick stayed away from the gate. Even after he returned the braid. Even after he wept and the gate did not punish him. He watched from afar as the village began to change, how people gathered near the threshold, how plants bloomed where his own fields withered. He watched Lyra wrapped in silvered hair and soft light, speaking with those who once ignored her. The quiet girl he had shamed now stood taller than him in every way that mattered. And something in him began to rot. His wheat yellowed early. The goats refused to enter the shed. His well dried, though the village spring overflowed nearby. At first he blamed the frost, the wind, the soil. But as weeks passed he began to see patterns. When he walked near the gate, his vision swam. When he spoke Lyra's name aloud, his tongue felt thick. One morning, he awoke to find his voice hoarse, choked, as if swallowed by something deeper than sleep. He avoided the gate, but it no longer needed closeness to unsettle him. It lived in the air now. And Merrick, he began to unravel. He stopped speaking to the neighbors. When they greeted him, he looked past them, eyes sunken. He began muttering to himself in the fields, pacing circles that led nowhere. When his plow cracked in half for the third time, he screamed at the sky. "She's poisoned it," he spat. "She's turned them all." No one answered. The crows gathered on his roof and did not move. One night, under a blood-red moon, Merrick snapped. He waited until the village slept, wrapped in the hush of frost and firelight. Then he crept from his cottage carrying a dull blade, not new, not sharp, but heavy with purpose. He made his way to the gate. Lyra stood beneath it, her silver hair catching the moonlight like a river. She turned when she heard him. Her face did not flinch. "Merrick," she said softly. "You bewitched them," he hissed. "You turned them against me. My land is dying. My animals won't eat. My voice?" He clutched his throat. "You took it." "No," she replied. "You gave it away." He rushed forward, blade raised, shaking. "I'll end this. I'll cut it off again, see how the gate sings for me." He lunged. The wind stilled. The gate screamed. With a crack like thunder, it slammed shut, not fully but fast enough to catch his coat, tearing it from his body and dragging him to the ground. The blade skittered from his hand, vanishing into the grass. Merrick lay gasping in the mud, eyes wide with something like recognition, or terror. The gate groaned once more, low and final. Then silence. By morning the story had spread. Some said the gate had tried to eat him. Others whispered that the blade was found twisted and rusted, as if time itself had rejected it. Merrick was seen pacing the edge of the village the next day, eyes darting, mouth murmuring. A child offered him bread. He slapped it away and began shouting at invisible ghosts. People turned from him. Not in cruelty, but in sorrow. Bad luck followed him like smoke now. Roof leaks, ruined tools, dead hens. No matter where he stepped, something cracked or soured. Eventually the elders came to him. Softly, firmly, and they told him he must leave. He packed little. No one offered him goodbye. No horses would carry him. No dog followed. He passed the gate on foot, trembling. It stood ajar, humming faintly, silver ivy curling near its hinges. Lyra waited by it, calm. He paused, shoulders sunken. "Did you do this?" he asked, not with malice but a desperate child's question. Lyra shook her head. "You did this." "I was only a boy," he rasped. "I didn't know. You knew what pain was. You chose to share it." He looked away. The wind picked up. The gate groaned. He stepped through. And as his foot crossed the threshold, the gate shuddered, a low, aching sound, not of rage but release. Like something being unknotted. Then it swung open fully for the first time in seasons. Behind him the silver plants withered. Ahead, a long road, cold and bare. Merrick did not look back. He disappeared into the woods. The gate creaked once more, then stilled. Later, Lyra stood alone beneath it. She touched the bark. It was warm again. Stronger. She could still hear echoes, not of Merrick but of all those who had passed before. Grief, guilt, love tangled deep within hurt. She knew now that the gate did not punish. It reflected. And some people, when faced with their truth, could not bear the weight of it. The village was quiet that night. But not silent. Children played beneath the trees. Women hung herbs in circles on the posts. Men carved new beams for a bench by the gate's edge. Lyra sat among them, her hair falling like river grass, her hands folded in her lap. She did not celebrate Merrick's exile. But she understood it. Some roots must be removed so others can grow. And the gate, like the world, needed tending. Not just for wounds, but for what came after. Lyra did not become a leader. Not in the way of loud voices or raised hands. She became something quieter, deeper. A presence. Where once she had walked with her eyes low and her steps hushed, now people made room for her in silence, not out of fear but reverence. Not worship but recognition. She did not demand. She invited. And when she spoke, people listened. The gate had changed too. No longer just a threshold or relic, it now stood like a living monument. Not to grief alone, but to transformation. Its wood shifted in color with each passing season. Deep crimson in autumn, pale gold in spring, soft gray-blue during the rains. And when someone stood before it and told the truth, a real truth heavy and raw, the gate responded. Sometimes with a shimmer of light in its grain. Sometimes with a sigh of wind. Sometimes with color. A flash of violet in the bark. A ripple of green. A warmth that lingered. These were not miracles. They were acknowledgments. People came more often now. Not always with offerings but with memories. With pain. With questions they could not ask anyone else. Lyra stood beside them when they spoke. Not to answer but to witness. A boy who once struck his brother. A woman who buried her infant and never told a soul. A farmer who stole grain during the famine. One by one they came. One by one they were heard. The gate never judged. It only remembered. And in remembering it made space for something new. Lyra began teaching the children how to listen. Not to the gate, that came later, but to each other. She taught them to sit in stillness. To ask, what hurts? And then to wait for the answer. She showed them how to braid ribbons into the ivy, not to bind it, but to celebrate it. She told them stories, not the kind found in books, but the kind buried in the folds of everyday life. Stories of names forgotten. Of songs only sung in mourning. Of joy hidden in sorrow. The children listened. And over time so did the village. Lyra never claimed to speak for the gate. She was its companion, not its voice. But people came to her when they needed help saying the hard things. I don't know how, they would whisper. And she would take their hand and say, then let's learn together. She taught them that pain had shape, a language that didn't need to be pretty, only honest. She showed them how to let go without forgetting. The gate grew darker in some places, richer in others, like a tree ringed with stories. And the village, once afraid of its own silence, began to hum with quiet truths. One evening a traveler came. A woman with weathered eyes and a limp in her step. She had heard of the gate, stories told in whispers in the southern markets, carried by merchants and rumor. I lost something, she said to Lyra. I don't know what. Then speak, Lyra said, and we'll find out. They sat beneath the gate. The woman began to talk. Not with clarity but with ache. Fragments. Regrets. Names that meant nothing and everything. As she spoke, the gate brightened, a thin, pulsing glow in the grain. When she finished, the woman cried. Not from pain but relief. It's not lost, she whispered. I just forgot how to carry it. Lyra nodded. And the gate warmed. More travelers came. A boy who could not cry. A soldier who carried too many ghosts. A midwife who had seen too much death to hold joy. They spoke. They listened. And the gate remembered. Sometimes, Lyra wrote the stories down, not all, only the ones people offered her freely. She kept them in a book bound in bark with no title on its cover. It rested in a hollow near the gate, wrapped in linen. Not a sacred text. Just a memory. One anyone could read. Lyra's own story changed too. Not erased but integrated. The girl once tied to the gate in shame had become its steward, its friend. Her silver hair now brushed the ground when she knelt. She often braided it with the herbs the villagers left behind, rosemary, rue, sage, symbols of healing and memory. She did not speak of Merrick. She did not need to. The gate held that story now. What mattered was what came after. One day a child asked, will the gate ever stop remembering? Lyra smiled gently. Only when we stop speaking. And what happens then? Then it sleeps, she said. But it never dies. Will you ever leave? The child asked. Lyra looked past the gate into the woods. Maybe, she said. If I'm called elsewhere. Will it be lonely? Lyra shook her head. Not if you keep listening. Years passed but the gate never aged. It deepened. Its bark held the thumbprints of 1,000 touches, the tears of generations, the songs hummed by old women and young boys. It was no longer just a gate. It was a keeper. Of pain. Of healing. Of truth. And beside it always was the girl who listened. The storm did not begin with thunder. It began with a stillness. A pause in the wind. A silence so deep even the birds dared not cry. Then came the clouds, thick violet-gray beasts that swallowed the horizon, and the sky broke open. Rain fell like knives. Trees cracked like bone. The river surged in its bed, pulling soil and stone with it. Roofs collapsed. Fences vanished. And still the storm raged. But the gate stood. People who had once stood beneath it, who had knelt, wept, whispered truths into its wood, fled there again. And the gate opened. Not wide, not with sound, but with a gentle glow that pulsed like a heartbeat, casting light over the grass even as the rain beat down. They gathered. The girl who had lost her mother, the baker who once confessed his theft, the old man who spoke to his dead wife each week beneath the arch. They huddled close. And the storm passed over them. When the wind died and the sun returned, the village took stock. The homes of those who had sought forgiveness, who had spoken truth, were battered but standing. Others, those who mocked the gate, who warned their children not to go near, who whispered that Lyra's silence was a curse, had not fared so well. Roofs torn clean off. Crops drowned. Chimneys toppled. And for the first time, the question that had lingered unspoken since the gate first refused to close rang clear across the village. What? The elders called a meeting. Not in the square but by the gate. Lyra was invited, not summoned but welcomed, and when she arrived, people stepped aside like water parting around stone. She sat quietly on the low bench, hair silver and soaked at the ends, eyes calm. The eldest among them, a woman named Senna, bent but unbroken, stood first. "We watched the gate," she said. "We tried to fix it, to explain it, to own it." Her voice cracked. "But the gate does not belong to us." A murmur of agreement passed through the crowd. "It belongs," Senna said, looking to Lyra, "to truth." They offered her honor. A carved seat in the elders' circle. A title, gatekeeper. Led. A home in the center of the village. Gifts, cloth, honey, rings carved from storm-felled trees. Lyra accepted their kindness with a bowed head. But when they asked what she wished in return, she said only this: "I want peace." "Then you shall have it," Senna said. But Lyra shook her head gently. "No. You must choose peace. For yourselves. For each other." The gate had not punished. It had protected. Not out of vengeance but recognition. It responded to the spirit behind action. To the intent behind the word. It bloomed for those who tried to heal, and it shielded those who chose truth no matter how late. It could not be bribed or claimed. It was a living memory. A judge with no voice, only presence. And now, at last, the village understood. In the days that followed, changes rippled outward. The villagers no longer treated the gate like a shrine or relic. They planted herbs around its base, not out of ritual but care. They tended the ivy without tying it down. Children played near it again, not with reverence but comfort. And Lyra? She retreated to the edge of the village, to a small home beneath an elder tree. No symbols. No titles. But still, when someone hurt, they came. And when they asked, "Will the gate listen?" she said, "Yes." Then waited. One night, as the stars blinked low in a cold sky, Lyra walked to the gate alone. She pressed her palm against the wood. It was warm. Not with heat but memory. She closed her eyes. And for the first time in years she spoke her truth. "I was angry," she whispered. "Not just at Merrick. At everyone. At myself." The wind stirred. I wanted to break. To disappear. But I stayed. The gate shimmered, just faintly, along the grain. "I didn't heal to be your mirror. I healed so I wouldn't become what hurt me." And in the silence that followed, the gate hummed. Not in sorrow. In agreement. In time, Lyra would become a name passed down in story, but not myth. No statues bore her likeness. But the children learned to ask the hard questions because of her. The elders wept openly now without shame. And the gate stood always open. Not to keep danger out, but to let truth in.